Bruins Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5. And presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That's Scott McLaughlin. Scott, what is up?
Not much, Evan. I'm hoping we have better chemistry than any of the Bruins' first three lines.
Well, you're telling me that we might have more chemistry than Johnny Beecher with Pavel Zacha and David Pastrnak. Is that what you're hitting at?
That's what it's come down to. Yeah, first line Johnny Beecher.
You know what? It just goes to prove another scouting win for the Bruins. They first round pick, first line player. God, I mean, we were saying it all along. We knew it. He has the speed to do it. There he is. It's finally the first liner the Bruins have been hoping for.
It's going to be wild if these combinations that they had at Wednesday's practice actually click at all and produce something Thursday night.
It would be funny, they win the cup at the end of the year, and it's they're powered by the Marchand, Lindholm, Kastelik line, and people are just immediately like the end of the year documentary. It's yeah, remember that day, and October 30th, they were 4-5-1. Montgomery jumbled the lines, and then boom, the fourth line was sprinkled throughout, and they ended up winning the cup. I give these lines a period and a half, but we'll get to them in a bit. Bruins lose on Tuesday night 2-0 to the Philadelphia Flyers in a complete stinker. I mean, that is as frustrating, as demoralizing a loss, I think, as they've had this year. I thought Nashville was the worst prior to... I mean, Florida game 1 was its own thing, but that's Florida. Going to a winless Nashville and lose 4-0, that's pretty bad. This, though, this really wasn't good. To come out with 0 goals at any strength, at any situation in the game, to Philly, who, again, one of the worst teams in the league, feels like that Toronto win on Saturday was sort of the outlier. Where are you at right now with all this?
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it even worse is that they took a step in the right direction in that Toronto game and, actually played pretty well 5-on-5, had some good stretches, probably should not have gotten to overtime, but, they blow it late with a breakdown.
We'll pretend that last mistake didn't happen.
Yeah.
We'll brush that out.
Leaves Austin Matthews wide open, but then they win in overtime, and you get that emotional lift, and Brad Marchand has the monkey off his back. And you're thinking, okay, that's at least something you can build on. Now the Flyers are sitting there. Going into Tuesday night, they had given up the most goals in the NHL. And it's all right, now here's where you start to build something. And then, as you said, they just lay a complete egg and get shut out. And, this wasn't a ran into a random goalie who stands on his head Tuesday night. They didn't test Sam Ersson that much.
No.
At times a little bit, but I mean, they had a 5-on-3 power play from minute 37 and had one actual good chance that forced him to make a save. And even that, Pastrnak kind of shot it right into his chest. So it's man, they're just not generating anything offensively. Certainly not in the way of high danger chances. They're down 1-0 going into the third period, and they land 3 shots on goal in the third period. I mean, it's baffling. You can't explain it. How is that possible? How do you land 3 shots on goal, trailing 1-0 in a game you have to have against a team that had been pretty porous defensively? The vibes are not good.
No, and you wrote it this morning. That 5-on-3 you mentioned, they had a minute 37, 6 shot attempts. In the order, you wrote Zacha wide after a partial block, Marchand blocked, Pastrnak saved on a quality look from the left dot, the one actual high danger chance. Marchand partially blocked, and the puck flutters in on goal. Technically a shot on goal, but not a dangerous. I respect that you didn't count that one. McAvoy fouls off a one-timer. McAvoy shoots into a body as the power play expires and hands the Flyers a 2-1 the other way. Again, they had a lot of zone time last night, and they produced nothing with it. And I don't even mean in goals. It's just all perimeter stuff. And they will pass until you're blue in the face. around the outside, down below the dots, around the net. They will gladly do that. And they just cannot figure out how to get to the front of the net. And there was a couple chances in the second. I think they finished with, according to Natural Stat Trick, 7 5-on-5 high danger chances throughout the game. Still, though, like if this was NHL 25 and you had like the zone time number, like the Bruins would have crushed the Flyers in zone time, just the amount of time they were in the offensive zone. And that's what makes it so frustrating. And even those power plays, it's all stationary. It's Pastrnak on one side of McAvoy, Marchand on the other. They do not move. They are just right there. You have Zacha in the middle, and then they had Brazeau down there later. Like, to me, there's nothing going right now. And I hit it on it earlier, like, against Toronto, it was all working. But for the last week, it hasn't been. Utah wasn't there. Nashville wasn't there. Dallas wasn't there. The Dallas didn't have a 5-on-5 goal. Utah, they had one. It was that Cole Koepke shot. If we want to play like the pick'ems, like really like hit home our point, you could say they have won. Take away the Toronto game, they have won 5-on-5 goals since Utah. We take away the Toronto game, and that never happened.
Yeah,
but it's a legitimate concern, and it's gotten to the point where, I mean, again, like, we talked about it at the very beginning. The lines today: Beecher, Zacha, Pastrnak, Marchand, Lindholm, Kastelik, Jones, Coyle, Koepke, Frederick, Patra, Brazeau, Geeky, the odd man out. I mean, that's how desperate they are at this point.
Yeah, and the big news there is splitting up David Pastrnak and Elias Lindholm, who, outside of a few random shifts, had been together pretty much from the start of the year, all through camp. Is a combination that the Bruins were excited about going into the season. That's when they signed Elias Lindholm to a big contract in free agency. It was partly with the intent of playing him with Pastrnak, and you thought there were some encouraging signs there early on. Lindholm had 5 points in the first 3 games, but since then it just really has not worked. Lindholm has now gone 7 games without a point. Pastrnak has 2 even strength points during that time, and one of them was a 4-on-4 playing with Patra. So that they've been getting I just went through this a little while ago. They've been getting doubled up in high danger chances during their shifts on the season. It's 24-12 to the opponent. Like, it hasn't worked. So you had to split them up. Jim Montgomery said that on Wednesday, that, he thinks it should work. He thinks they're 2 players who should mesh, but it just hasn't materialized. So they're changing that up. As you said, like, you're taking what's been their best line, the fourth line of Beecher, Kastelik, and Koepke, and now you're sprinkling those 3 guys throughout the lineup. And Montgomery said the idea is to try to, tell them to keep playing the way they've been playing, and hope that forces their new line mates to play that way. We'll see if it works. I don't know. Like, it feels like the kind of thing that you do when you're sort of out of ideas and you've tried everything else. So, I get the thinking behind it. And at this point, like, they've done so little at 5-on-5 that I'm not sure there really is like a worse option, right? It's like, if you're already getting nothing, then what does throwing everything into a blender really matter? Without any help from the outside, like, this is kind of all Jim Montgomery can do. And as of now, there is still no help from the outside. There's still no contract for Tyler Johnson. There's no call-up of anyone from Providence. So, he's trying to find a way to get something out of this group.
Yeah, maybe you get some duos that work well together, and you say, "Oh, Max Jones and Charlie Coyle are terrific together." We figured it out. We've cracked the code. I think one of the most disappointing parts of Tuesday's game against the Flyers was that's a game where a Zacha, Lindholm, Pastrnak line should have like 4 goals combined. Like, that should be a line that, every guy's got like 1 to 3 points, and it's a really good night and sort of something you build off of.
Well, like, remember the Flyers game, last year when it was Pastrnak, Zacha, and James Van Riemsdyk, And they did like exactly that. They had like 4 goals in the first period or something.
Yep. Just wipe the floor with them. And that's what Tuesday was setting up to be. I thought like that's a layup of a game for those guys. And they did have a lot of ozone time. Like Zacha had some chances down by the net. He's had a lot of chances this year that he just has not converted on. And so that's all well and good, but you still can't produce at all. And I do wonder, like, is this a sign of a bigger problem of, is Lindholm not a good fit with Pastrnak? Like again, we're only a month in, a lot can change. It's been 9 games, but 7 straight pointless games, or it's been 10 games, excuse me, but 7 straight pointless games is incredible for a number 1 center playing with David Pastrnak and Pavel Zacha and being a number 1 power play guy, which, by the way, the Bruins ranked 26th in the NHL in power play percentage right now, which is not great. So it leads to a big question, Scott. Leads to a big old question, which we'll get to in a second. But first, quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks.
The leaves have fallen and the temperature is dropping, but you know what that means. Hockey season is finally here. And there's so many ways for you to get in on the action and win up to 100 times your cash with as little as 4 correct picks on Prize Picks, as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level on the ice, gridiron, court, and much more. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this hockey season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. There's really no shortage of ways to participate in Prize Picks, especially during hockey season. This week, I'm picking David Pastrnak for more than 0.5 goals and Nikita Kucherov for more than 1 assist. It's really that easy. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the Prize Picks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game.
So the big question, Scott, and I think it's on everybody's mind. I did an episode on it on Friday, and then the Bruins won against the Leafs, so I came on Bruins Beat with Conor on Monday and said, all's good. It's all set. They did what they had to do. They've righted the ship. But we're back to Friday, which was, is Jim Montgomery on the hot seat? I mean, and I think that's a valid question to ask. All of the buttons he pushed last week just didn't produce desired results. They do end up beating the Leafs, but again, had that bad play there at the end of the game. If they lose in overtime and they lose like they did on Tuesday, like, are we sitting here wondering when he's fired if they had lost that Toronto game? And where do you think they're at with the Montgomery stuff?
Yeah, I think the seat has to be pretty warm at this point, whether that's fair or not. Like, I think some of their issues this season are certainly on Montgomery. He hasn't been able to get the team to play the way that he wants them to play. Other issues are on Don Sweeney for not putting together a better roster and on the players for simply not performing up to the level that they're capable of, regardless of everything else that's going on around them. Like, so many guys on this team are just underperforming, but the reality of the NHL and really every pro sports league is that when a team's underperforming, when management looks at it and says, wow, this really doesn't look anything like what we were expecting, the easiest change to make, and usually the first change that gets made, is the head coach. It's just the business. You can't, you're not making 5 trades to shake up the roster. You can't do that. What you can do is you can fire the head coach and bring in someone different with a different voice. So, I don't know like how close the Bruins are to that. I don't have any sources or anyone telling me, when it might happen or if it's going to happen or whatever. But just knowing the league and knowing how teams handle situations like this, I think it's fair to say that like if it really starts to snowball, if they go on the road and lose a couple more, or come back home and lose to Seattle or Toronto next week or whatever, like, and all of a sudden you're talking about them losing 7 out of 8 or something like that. I think it stands to reason that some sort of big change like that would be coming.
Yeah, and we said it before we came on, like the Toronto game next Tuesday. Like, is that the third like must-win Maple Leafs game for Montgomery to keep his job? And I mean, this is a sort of a difficult stretch coming up. You have Carolina on Halloween night. On Thursday, you have Philly on the road. Historically, the Bruins are usually pretty good in Philadelphia at 1 p.m. on Saturdays. So like maybe maybe it ends there. They come home against Seattle on Sunday for a 5 o'clock game, which is very out of the blue for the Bruins. And then they're in Toronto on Tuesday. So you sort of have this 4-game stretch that's not easy. That's awkward times. And I agree with you. Like, they're not doing so hot, obviously. Management has high expectations. I also think Montgomery is such a fascinating case because, he has had such great regular season success the last 2 years. Obviously, the 2023 playoffs hangs over his head like a dark cloud. I think management wishes they got to Game 7 against Florida last year in the second round, and he's still not signed after this year. So and again, he's not a guy that the Bruins developed. He was brought in. And I always go back to that of like, he's not this guy who's been ingrained in the organization for years and years, like a Bruce Cassidy, or like a Jay Leach, or a Chris Kelly, or even like a Joe Sacco, who's been around now for a really long time on the bench. Like, I wonder if and when they make that move. I also the Bruins are a pretty stable organization. Like, Sweeney's usually pretty calculated with this stuff. I know I'll get some crap for that, but like, this isn't an organization that just fires coaches on a whim. I mean, we're going back a long time. We're going back to when Chiarelli was GM, and this is, before I was covering the team. And I think before you were covering the team too. Like, there were a lot of times in 09 and 10 when Claude was rumored to be gone or on the hot seat, or, oh, they need to fire him now. Even in 2011, before that infamous Thrashers game in December, like, it was, oh my God, does Claude need to go? We never really had that with Cassidy at all until it just ended one day, and it was like, all right, well, that's that. But I don't know. I have kind of a hard time imagining them just pulling the plug so soon, and just less than 3 years into the guy's tenure. But he's not signed after this year, so like, that's the other part of it that makes it so questionable.
Yeah, it's been a long time since they've done an early season firing. Like, even like Claude was mid-season, but that was in February. Kind of changed things up with a stretch run as that team was trying to make a playoff push. So, and it also, I also think for general managers, you don't want to fire coaches that you hired, because every time you do it, you're going to be wondering, how many of these do I get? And so Sweeney obviously inherited Claude Julien, makes that change to Cassidy. Then he fires Cassidy and hires Montgomery. Now, if he's going to fire Montgomery after really just 2+ years, how many more does he get? Like, is it he needs to hit a home run on the next hire, or he's done? Whereas, if you keep Montgomery around and you can kind of muddle your way through this, like, maybe that buys Sweeney a little extra time. So I know, like, I said, like, it's the easy thing for a GM to do, and it is, but it's still not something you want to do. Like, Don Sweeney doesn't want to fire Jim Montgomery, but the question is, at some point, does this get bad enough where there's just no other shakeup to make? Which it makes it more curious to me, though, that there haven't been roster moves, like that Tyler Johnson hasn't been signed, that you haven't, whether it's Fabian Lysell or whoever, you tried calling someone up from Providence for a spark. Like, I absolutely do not expect either of those guys or anyone else to be any kind of savior, but it at least changes the mix. Like, it could at least be a spark. It could do something.
Yeah.
So it feels like Don Sweeney has not exhausted all his options yet. So I wonder if you get any of that first before potentially firing Montgomery. But either way, like this can't snowball, or something will have to change.
Something has to, and it just comes down to what. I also look at, like, Bruce Cassidy went and won a cup the first year after they let him go. And again, then you fire the guy you replaced him with 2 years later with nothing to really show for it. And that goes back to your point about Sweeney, not wanting to look bad. And I just wonder if he'd be open to that. I mean, they did go out and get Jay Leach in the offseason. So, like, Jay Leach is on the bench. Joe Sacco's on the bench. Like, you do have these internal replacements. It's been interesting because the last couple weeks, this has sort of been a storyline. And obviously on the skate pod, I know you guys talk about it, and I've talked about it a lot here. And I haven't really given like a full opinion on, yes, they should fire him, or no, they shouldn't. Because I think it's really complex and it changes all the time. And I don't think it's bad enough. I think the last 2 years, I think Bruins fans and the Bruins themselves have become accustomed to just dominating the first month of the year, the first 2 months of the year. And everybody's like, oh my God, the Bruins are one of the best teams again. Wouldn't you, can you believe it? I mean, maybe they are just hitting some adversity. Maybe, there are guys in this lineup. There has been turnover. Maybe it's just going to take some time to gel. I just feel like time is kind of not running out, but you can't lose so much, track in the race here. Like, so that's the other part of it. And you have so many guys right now who are in their worst case scenarios. I mean, this is as bad as Charlie Coyle has played, I think, with the Bruins. So that there's that. Geeky has been awful. Frederick has been bad. Zacha has not been himself. Pasternak at times, has not been, I know he has 6 goals, he leads the team in goals, but still, I don't think he's played up to where he can be. Lindholm, McAvoy, Brazeau up until recently, like, so many guys are just not at that level. And yeah, some of that's the head coach, but it's also on some of them too. So I think that's the difficult thing here is, is a new head coach going to come in and be enough of a spark? It was in 2017. Can it be now? I think that's the other part of it too.
Right. So many of those guys, it's like, regardless of maybe Montgomery's game plan doesn't fully suit your game, or maybe you don't have the right combination, but so many, like, all of those guys really can be so much better just individually. Like, just go out and work your ass off and, like, see what happens. Like that you can do, right? Like, you can skate hard, you can play physical, you can go to the front of the net, regardless of what else is going on. And then, like, try to build something from there, but you're not even getting that. Like, you're not even getting guys winning races, winning battles. Like, it's just, it all looks so, I don't know, slow, disconnected,
they look demoralized
at times. Like, yeah, like they do. They look deflated. And you're right. Like, I mean, Charlie Coyle's on pace for 8 points. He has 1 point in 10 games.
Have you I don't know if you've ever seen, so elite prospects, when players are in juniors, I don't know if they do this for college or the NHL, but when a player is in junior hockey, they have what the stat line is, then they say projected. And it's basically just like a proportion of like how many points they have in that time. So if a guy has like 0 goals and 2 assists in 4 games, they'll have him with like, I don't know, 30 assists in 60 games to end the year. No goals or anything. You're right. Coyle right now would be like, what, 12 assists at the end of the year or something? I mean, that would be like his projected numbers.
Yeah, like it's crazy. And that's where it's like there has to at least be some, personal pride to just pick your game up. And these guys all say the right things. On Wednesday after practice, we talked to both Coyle and Elias Lindholm, and like they're owning up to it. They're saying, I haven't been good enough, and here's what I have to do better. They're not pointing fingers. They're not making excuses for themselves, but yet too many games they go out there and they're not doing it. Like the words and the intention of what they're saying or what they seem to recognize for whatever reason isn't translating to actually doing it on the ice. And that's, it's almost up and down the lineup. Like you can maybe pick out, a handful of guys who are actually playing hard on a night-to-night basis. Like, all right, the fourth line, those guys, sure. But outside of that, like, I don't know that anyone's really bringing it consistently. Different guys in different pockets here and there, but otherwise, it's just, all those guys we're talking about, like, underperforming or not putting up points. It's like, yeah, those guys should all be top 9 forwards. Like, you just can't have that many guys underperforming and expect to go anywhere.
You can't. And these are your highest earners. I mean, McAvoy is trying to do way too much on a shift-to-shift basis, and Pastrnak, just the body language sometimes is not good. And I think, it's funny. Elliot Friedman wrote in 32 Thoughts, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, mentioned how, just a theory of his was that the Bruins kind of got demoralized by those 2 Panther losses early, where it's like you're preparing your whole season to beat the Panthers, and in your first 4 games, you lose to them twice. And what kind of mental impact that has on them. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but they look like a team that isn't playing for anything. I mean, you're right. Like the second and third efforts, winning puck battles, hustling, it's not there. I mean, that one goal on Thursday night, that the Flyers scored in the second, it's like, Jesus, like, cover them, win your battles, like, hustle back. Yeah. And that's where, I think it was Geeky who kind of did like a sort of a flyby on the eventual goal scorer. I forget his name.
Poitras too. Poitras along the boards.
That's right.
Does a flyby that opens up a free passing lane, and it's two forwards went off for a bad change there. Like the Flyers were already
was one.
Yeah, the Flyers were already transitioning up ice, and Pastrnak and I forget who the other forward was, both are going off for a change there, and it's like, they've got 5 guys going forward, and now you have 2 guys heading to the bench. Like, what do you think's going to happen here? And there's so many mistakes like that too, where it's like, again, it almost seems like a lack of just mental engagement. I mean, how many unforced icings has this team had? 5-on-5, and then even on the power play, like they've had some icings where they've just completely missed passes. Like they just look so off. And the Panthers thing, maybe, but even that, it's like, that's a couple of weeks ago. You're past that. Yeah. Right. Like, get over it. Get over yourselves. Like, okay, you're going to face them again later in the year. Like, worry about it then. Right now, just figure yourselves out. Yeah.
No, it's exactly what it is. So we've kind of discussed Montgomery getting fired. I wonder if there's other avenues to kind of spark the team too that aren't just Tyler Johnson and Fabian Lysell. But first, quick word from our friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like watching an NBA or NHL game live. The energy in the building, the sounds on the ice or the court, the memories you make with family, friends, and other fans. It's unmatched. And the coolest part is when strangers sitting around you become your best friends. You can make these memories with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. When I use Game Time, I also love the flash deals, which help me get discounted prices on really good seats. Plus, who doesn't love seat views, which give a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy? So, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Now, back to the show. So I think it's interesting. I was on Pucks with Haggs with Diver and Haggs actually earlier on Wednesday. So I'm in like the same outfit, the same. Like, people are probably like, "Wow, he just never changes his clothes." It's like, no, I'm recording a million in a day.
This is the same thing I had on for Wednesday's skate pod. So
exactly. Like, we're not, I don't have a designer's designing me or anything. And Diver brought up the idea of a trade, and I thought this was interesting. Trent Frederick and Morgan Geeky, both in contract years, both nearing the end of their deals. Frederick, obviously kind of probably wants to be looked at as a top 6 forward as he enters the market. Was promoted to the 4th line on Wednesday, so I don't think that's going so hot. I think he has 3 points in 10 games, and Geeky has 1 point in 9. He brought up the idea of like a Trent Frederic for Frank Vetrano trade, or some sort of semblance of that. Just dealing off a Frederic or a Geeky. Frederic, a guy that the room really likes. Someone who, is still young, has some promise, has some grit to his game, maybe has some trade value, and he is, on an expiring deal. And a team like Anaheim maybe would want someone that's young and like that. And maybe it's not a Frederic for Vetrano, but I do wonder if Sweeney starts to take calls on those guys. And I don't know what trade value Morgan Geeky has right now. I can't imagine it's much at all. But Frederic might have a little bit more. And I wonder if that's an area. A guy like a Frederic, because no one else like Brazeau, you're really dealing Brazeau. You're not dealing anyone off the 4th line, although that would be the definition of selling high. Like you get like a 2nd round pick for Cole Koepke. It's like, holy crap, we're cooking, we're dealing. But I do wonder if it's someone like a Frederic that gets dealt, or they go that route before or even after firing the coach.
Yeah, it's fair. I said like you can't make 5 trades, but yeah, you can make 1, maybe 2. Like it's possible. This generally there aren't a whole lot of trades that get made this time of year. Although Utah and Detroit did just make one on Wednesday involving Ali Mata. Really because Utah has had like 47 injuries on defense.
I was gonna say,
yeah, like they had to do something. Like, holy cow! But yeah, generally you don't see a lot of trades around this time of year. Certainly not like hockey trades, which I think is what the Bruins would want to do. I don't think they'd be interested in getting like picks or prospects. Like they'd want, they'd want another player back. But yeah, you can poke around and see what's out there. Something like that trade in particular, Frederic for Vetrano, like that would make sense, right? Vetrano probably sparks your offense a bit. With Frederic, it's the ironic thing there is like Anaheim would be acquiring him, hoping that they're getting like this guy's going to kind of play tough, gritty, hard, help kind of change the culture a little in that way, or how the team works. And all those same things like make him in theory perfect for what the Bruins wanted to be this year, but he hasn't been that and they haven't been that. So yeah, like Frederic especially, like that. I know he has 3 points, so like he doesn't stand out as much as Coyle or Geeky down at 1 point, but I really feel like Frederic has just not looked like the player you expect him to look like. Not nearly as physically engaged as we've seen him in the past. I feel like every time you see any Bruin kind of making a hit that can change momentum, it's always that 4th line, and it's not Frederic. And like he has been that guy in the past, and it just hasn't been there this year, and he certainly hasn't been involved offensively nearly as much. So yeah, I kind of feel like everything should be on the table. I don't know how, like I said, like how realistic it is to actually pull off a trade in October, or as the calendar turns to November here. But it's an option. Like I think there's very few guys, maybe a handful that you would consider like untouchable right now. So, and with all due respect to Trent Frederic, he probably would not be one of them.
I agree. And that's the thing, is that I think everything's on the table and you need to spark things some way, because like, again, and I think this sort of hits back at this of like, I had high expectations for this team this year, in large part because, they spent a lot of money getting a number 1 center. They spent a lot of money shoring up their defense with Nikita Zadorov, which again, I think everyone was kind of lukewarm on that at the time anyway. Like, oh, you're getting bigger, but like, how much better are you getting? I mean, that is an upgrade over Grzelcyk objectively. So like, I think that's fair. And you also had guys like Trent Frederic and Morgan Geeky entering contract years, where it's like, all right, they're coming off of 2 really good years. And in their year where they're going to have to prove themselves, they're going to do it. And there's, that everyone's moved back in the lineup, and, maybe they'll play with Patra, maybe they'll play with Coyle, whoever they play with. Like, you're going to have more points, and they're going to, really prove themselves, and it's going to make it hard on the Bruins next year. I mean, they've tanked their value through their first, through the first eighth of the season. And I think that's also what's sinking the Bruins is, we talk about guys like McAvoy and Pasternak and Elias Lindholm not performing, but you also have these guys in the middle, Marchand, Coyle, Frederick Geekie, who just are not doing anything. And, at least, Marchand had that goal on Saturday night, and he's had chances and this and that, but the puck's also not staying on his stick. Like, that's the other thing. And again, I don't know what the reasoning for that is, but like, he's having trouble handling the puck at times. And so you're right. They look off. They are way off. And does that change if Jay Leach gets promoted? Does that change if Joe Sacco gets promoted? I don't know. Like, do we hit a point in December where it's like, holy crap, maybe this roster just isn't good? Like, and you're not blowing this up. Like, I will always disagree with blowing this core up. McAvoy, Pasternak, Swayman, like, you've got those guys signed. Those are, high-end NHL players. At least they freaking should be. So I don't know where do you see this headed?
Yeah, well, the thing is like, there's the debate of whether you improved from last year and put together a roster that can compete for the cup. Like, that's one thing, and they feel very far from that right now.
Completely.
But even if you say like maybe that's not their ceiling, this roster should still be way better than it's been so far, than this team has played so far. Like, this should still comfortably be a playoff team. And right now, they're not in playoff position. They're tied for 11th in the Eastern Conference. They're on tiebreaker. They're last in their division. They only have 2 regulation wins through 10 games. So, yeah, like, so even if we need to lower their ceiling, and listen, I'm someone who thought this team was going to be a cup contender. Like,
I'm with you.
That was what I said going into the year. I thought they're going to be built better for the playoffs, even if they lost a few points in the regular season because you don't have the best goalie tandem anymore. So, all right, that might cost you some points. But never did I imagine them playing like this for any prolonged stretch. And, like, you can play it's early in the season game, but, you're getting to a point where, like, you're in a position where you have to start playing some catch up. And you don't want to be doing that, right? Like, everyone talks about that Thanksgiving mark. Like, that's 3 weeks out, and it's not hard and fast. There's teams that have proven that wrong in recent years that have come from lower in the standings in the second half of the year to make a run. You can do it, but you don't want to have to. Like, you don't want to be in a position where you need like a 700 winning percentage over the second half of the year to make the playoffs. Like, that's really tough. It's really tough to do.
It is. And I mean, you're 6 points back of Florida right now, who's in first. It's been the worst case scenario to start the year, I think. And it's really kind of been a mess because it starts with the Swayman stuff. And obviously they get it done right before the start of the year at the 11th hour, but they also went through hell to get it done. And then you've got this where they just come out of the gate and they flop, and they've completely flopped. And again, maybe over the next 4 games, they win all 4. Maybe they go into Carolina on Thursday and win, and they go to Philadelphia on Saturday and do the same, and they come home against Seattle and do the same, and Toronto, and we sit here a week from now and go, oh my God, this team is great. That guy's just starting to cook. But what indication do we have of that happening? That's the other part. Like, there's no sign. Saturday I thought was, but then you come out against one of the worst teams in the league, one of the worst defensive teams in the league, and put up no goals and 3 shots in the third period. And I have a tough time believing that they're just going to right the ship in the next couple of days. I don't see it.
They need to string good days together and good games together. And that's like, there's no excuse for them not being able to do that Tuesday. Like, you had that win over Toronto, you had Sunday off, you had a good full practice on Monday, and then you go out and do that Tuesday night. And it's like, they can't be good once out of every 5 games. Like they need to string together 4 or 5 straight good ones, almost regardless of the result. Like obviously they need to start winning games too, but just playing well game after game. Like put 4 or 5 together, and then maybe you can have an off game, right? No one expects you to do it all 82, but they've been way too inconsistent and just a complete inability to ratchet it up for more than a game every like week and a half or 2 weeks.
Completely. And again, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens over these next couple weeks, because I mean, we haven't had a stretch of Bruins games like this in how long? I mean, it's like I can't remember a time when they've struggled to this extent since I've started doing Bruins Beat, and that was 2019. Like I mean, obviously take the playoffs out of it. That debacle against the Panthers in 2023 was on a different stratosphere. But regular season wise, I can't remember a time when they struggled like this. Was it 2017? Was that the last time?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, because even like in recent years, like even last year, I feel like they had a couple stretches of maybe like 5 or 6 games where they'd fall off. Like they had one right before Christmas, where they hit a little bit of a skid, but it wasn't 10 games, and so yeah, like 10 games is a pretty long stretch where they have not played good hockey, and for it to happen right out of the gates, yeah, that's why you get the questions about Montgomery's job status or about are they going to make a trade or whatever, because there's nothing to fall back on. Like if this stretch happened, if they got off to a good start through 2 months and then this happened in December, you'd be like, okay, well, this doesn't look good, but hey, they have 2 months where we saw them playing pretty good hockey. Like, no, right now you don't have anything to fall back on as far as like, well, hey, at least we know they can do it. They just have to get back to it. Like now you're getting people really kind of starting to wonder, like, well, wait, can they do it? Like at all? Or is this just what this team is? So, yeah, they have to figure it out fast.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Scott, what can the people look forward to from you over at EEI?
More skate podcasts, articles up on WEI.com. I think that's it. Yeah, get my Twitter handle here at smclaughlin9, and yeah, all that good stuff.
All the fun stuff. Well, Scott, thank you for joining. A very positive, uplifting episode of Bruins Beat. I'm sure people are ready to spend money on the team and are really excited about these next 4 games. We got them amped up, which is just what you need. Scott, as always, thank you. And that's been Bruins Beat. I'm Evan Marinofsky, Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.